1. This story starts around 7 years ago when I was a senior in high school. I joined the cross-country team my senior year and really loved the experience and the team camaraderie. The boys and girls teams trained together in the A groups and B groups. The A group was all boys and me. I didn't mind this. It definitely pushed me to be a better runner, but it was really difficult to try and keep up with them. Being in A group, I grew close with a lot of the boys, and they all knew I had a boyfriend. One guy, Joe, was really funny and we got along great. We'd sit next to each other on the bus to meets and we'd text a lot, but I thought we were just friends. After cross-country ended, the boys convinced me to do indoor track. And this is where Joe got weird. In January, my relationship ended, and it was whatever. A high school relationship ending isn't the end of the world. But Joe started acting really strangely towards me. He'd get really mad if I didn't text him back. I went to a house party and drank, and he sent me this long text about how he was disappointed in me, and he thought I was better than that. Our friendship started to get emotionally abusive. Joe kept on mentioning how I made him feel worthless, and he said things like, "I bet you wouldn't even care if I died." He got jealous all the time and became so controlling. I was already under school stress, so I decided to take a break from Joe. He didn't like this. Joe started spreading rumors around school that I was hooking up with guys that had girlfriends. That I did sexually explicit things for weed and just really awful things. Luckily, most people didn't believe him. By the time outdoor track came around, our friendship was completely over. I was really happy because the girls' and boys' track teams were two separate things, and girls' distance had their own coach and their own practices. So I saw Joe, but I never had to train and practice with him. He stopped calling and texting me, and that was a relief too. After track season ended and I was about to graduate, Joe sent me a long apology. He said he didn't know he had feelings for me until my boyfriend and I broke up. He said that's what triggered his weird behavior, and he was sorry for ruining our friendship. I accepted his apology and went on with my life. We texted from time to time, but we absolutely were not close friends anymore. The summer after my senior year is where Joe started to make me nervous. At least once a week, at 1 and 2 in the morning, a car would drive down our street blasting its horn. It became such an issue that the whole neighborhood was on watch for the mystery horn blaster. I started getting texts from Joe some nights saying things like, "Come out." I'd reply the next morning with a question mark, and he'd say that he was drunk and just drunk texted. I worked over the summer, so I was usually in bed like 9 or 10-ish. But one night I was up a little late. When I turned off my lights in my room, I immediately got a text from Joe that said, "Good night, Monty." This freaked me out. I told my parents everything that had happened, and they were concerned. My dad immediately thought Joe was the mystery honker. I sent Joe a non-threatening text just saying that I worked long days so I'd normally be in bed early, so I'd appreciate not getting texted so late. I still got sporadic texts from Joe before the mystery honking stopped, which was great. In the fall, I went away to college. One weekend I came home, was up in my room, and I got a text from Joe at around midnight saying, "Welcome home, Monty." I freaked out and looked outside, but I didn't see his car. I just asked how he knew I was home, and he said lots of people were home for the weekend, so he just assumed I was too. Joe then proceeded to favorite all of my tweets, around 2,000, and like all of my Instagram posts. I had enough of him at this point and blocked him literally everywhere. I texted all of my friends and told them what happened, and to not mention me to Joe at all because he definitely was obsessed with me. Joe then called me and told me he was going to kill himself. I told my parents everything, and my dad got the police involved. I didn't hear from Joe after this until 2 summers later. It's important to note, around this time one of my brothers moved out. My mom wanted to turn my room into an office, so I moved rooms upstairs to his old room. My room now faced the back part of the house, not the street. My dad works in the courts, and occasionally he has to do bail duty, where if someone gets arrested, he's the person who has to post bail. It sucks because he can get a call at 2 a.m. and have to go bail someone out. On one particular night, my dad got a bail call at 2. He went downstairs and got water and saw the motion light in the backyard was on. That was weird. He looked out the kitchen window and saw a guy in our backyard, looking up at my room. He ran outside and the guy jumped on the fence. The police came and took statements, but it was the middle of the night. And my dad was pretty tired, so it could have been Joe, but the police couldn't prove it. The next few months I felt on edge. I felt really unsafe in my own house. How did Joe know I moved rooms? How long would he watch me? It was nauseating. My parents saw the toll this was taking on me physically and emotionally. I was snapping at them over small things. My hair was falling out. I was losing weight. One day at breakfast, my dad walked into the kitchen and said, "I'm handling the Joe situation today. He won't bother you anymore." After that, the incident stopped. I ran into Joe at a party a few years later. He saw me, turned white, and left the party. I have absolutely no clue what my dad did, but he made sure Joe and I will never meet again. 2. This happened around 6 months ago. I was 21 years old. I'm also female. My ex-trainer is a middle-aged man, possibly in his late 30s to early 40s. I had a friend who used to be a police officer. I knew him because he used to be my driving teacher. He told me he lost a lot of weight from his personal trainer nearby where I lived. I felt I could trust my friend's word because I thought he was a good judge of character and had good results. I aspired to become muscular and lean. I wanted to look like a bodybuilder. It was something I wanted for a really long time, and I've been looking for a personal trainer. My friend gave me his information. I was very busy most of the day with my full-time job, so I decided to schedule appointments at 4 a.m. My friend shows up at the gym at around that time as well, so I felt comfortable going at night. I went in and my friend wasn't there yet. The trainer gave me a tour of the gym and he seemed friendly and like an okay guy. He was a tall, large man, but he didn't look very muscular. I found that odd, but brushed it off and remembered my friend's results. We sit down and go over a plan, and he recommends I take a before picture, preferably in a bikini, that I only show him if I want to. I was slightly uncomfortable with that comment, but just assumed I was being oversensitive, and that he was just doing his job. I saw a picture of his wife and kids on his desk. That calmed me down a bit. There was no way he could possibly be interested in me if he's married, I thought to myself. I worked out for a couple months and grew to trust him more. I even opened up to him about why I aspire to become muscular. I want to be able to defend myself. It was like he was trying to build an emotional bond with me. Now that I look back on it, that's pretty unprofessional, but at the time I just thought he was being nice. I started to struggle with money. I felt I couldn't afford him anymore. I wasn't even where I wanted to be yet, and I haven't really learned much. He charged me $1 a minute, or $60 an hour, and I didn't realize how expensive that was at the time because I was ignorant. My boyfriend didn't like him. He was a power lifter and thought my trainer was an idiot and was overcharging me. Because I showed him some of my exercises my trainer told me to do, I started to want to quit, but I also didn't want to lose the muscle I've gained. I made a plan to quit once my boyfriend would be able to have enough time to teach me, or at least until I could work out independently. I mentioned to my trainer that I was struggling with money and that I was planning on cancelling soon. He gave me an offer. He said if I cleaned his gym once a week, I'd get a free session weekly. He said he also has other women clean his gym for free sessions. I stupidly accepted. My friend also started going to that gym at different times, so I didn't get to see him anymore. I wasn't struggling with money much since I started cleaning his gym. My trainer was there. It was at night time and I was alone with him most of the time other than the occasional client that would come in for training. I trained with him right after I finished cleaning his gym. He told me I should start wearing shorts and a tank top. I usually wore baggy sweatpants and a big t-shirt so he could see my progress. I felt very uncomfortable with that and didn't reply. I kept wearing my baggy pants and t-shirts. He kept bringing it up. That's when I started to feel really weird about things. I decided I should probably move on. I was still struggling with paying for him, and even though I really wanted my dream body, I just couldn't afford him any longer. I could barely afford food. I didn't see the point in working hard in the gym if I couldn't get proper nutrition, so I told my trainer about my concerns. He then made a really weird offer. He offered to make everything completely free and wanted to take me to the grocery store to show me how to shop. He offered all of this for free. He also added extra workout days during the week. It sounded too good to be true, almost like there was a catch. I told him he can just give me a grocery list instead, but he persisted on going with me and that I should wear shorts and a tank top. He then said, "We could even go and get a bite to eat afterwards." That's when I felt things were really weird. I mentioned this to my boyfriend, and he told me that was extremely unprofessional, and told me to cut contact with him. I did. Blocked his number and never came back. I still have to drive by that place on my way home from work. Every time I do, I feel gross. I don't really think I could do anything about what happened. He didn't break any laws that I know of, and he owned the place. I don't see much of my ex-cop friend anymore, and I work out on my own now. My boyfriend and I are still together. Edit. Forgot to mention, my boyfriend was college educated in health and fitness, and that's one of the reasons why he thought he wasn't legitimate. 3. I worked at Six Flags last spring and summer. Well, technically a freelance arts company leasing vending spots there. I was one of the oldest people hired. I was 18 at the time, attending college while most of my co-workers were in high school. I took photos in a sort of old-timey dress-up shop. It was honestly one of the most fun jobs I'd had. I was hired back in March 2018 and started work in April when the park was open on weekends only before the official opening. I had been working for about a month and the park was now open during the week for less than 10 hours per day, so I was able to work all day but was unfortunately the only one in the shop, as college was on summer break and high school was still in session until mid-June. You can see where this story is going. I was alone all day during the week and had some co-workers on the weekends. I was so terribly alone during the day that I'd walk across the path to go see my other co-worker out of boredom. When I was outside of my shop during the day, I began to notice a man hanging around my area. I'd mainly see him walk by very slowly, staring at me, I presumed my shop, the whole time. I figured he was just shy, wanted a picture inside, and was too afraid or socially awkward to ask for pricing. Deep down, he gave me an uneasy feeling, but I decided to ignore it because he was a customer in the park and was probably just very antisocial. I kept a smile and tried pulling in customers all day, every day. One day I smiled and waved at him. That was probably a big mistake. He walked over briskly to stand in front of me and stare at me. I was creeped out. I was scared. He then asked about prices after days of walking by me and staring. I breathed a sigh of relief and started going through my memorized sales pitch. After I finished, he started to smile, not a normal smile, one that made my skin crawl. He leaned in so close I could smell his breath. He asked how much it would be for him. I was confused, as I'd just gone through my price list, so I stated the prices were set and non-negotiable, unless you were an art company employee or a park employee. He shrugged and walked off. When I ran through my pitch, a family had grown interested and wanted some pictures, so I gladly took them into the shop and had a wonderful time photographing them. While I was checking the family out and collecting payment, I looked up and the man was back, leaning against the chair barrier in front of my shop. The family collected their things and walked to the chain. The man had to move to the side for me to open it for them. I immediately closed it behind them as he tried pushing his way into the shop. I told him I was sorry, but only paying customers could come in. He wasn't allowed in unless he was considering a purchase. He frowned and walked away. I waited a few minutes, tidied up the shop, and stepped back outside. It was almost closing time, so it was pointless, but I had to stand outside or else I'd get in trouble with my boss. I noticed him one last time that day. Across the way from me was a game, and I saw him hiding behind it, peeking his head out and looking at me. I can't tell you how scared I was. I wanted to cry. He continued to do this for the entire week, and I eventually began to ignore him, which he did not like. On that Friday, as soon as the park opened, he made a beeline towards me. I was out front organizing outdoor props and I froze. I hastily dropped what I was doing and went inside, closing the chain behind me. He paced back and forth in front of the chain, muttering to himself and looking at me. I was so terrified. I was going to run to the phone and call security if he didn't leave. He suddenly lurched forward, grabbing the chain in both of his hands. I will never forget this moment, because my heart stopped and my blood ran cold. His eyes were wild, and that same menacing grin was back. He started whispering about the things he wanted me to do to him. It was disgusting. He was talking about how he loved me and all of the sexual things he wanted to do to me. He wanted me to put him in a dress and said he wanted me to humiliate him in front of all the people in the park. I was slowly backing up to the wall in my shop, and he started yelling and laughing. I told him to go away, that I would call security if he didn't leave right away. He got even more angry and said something that keeps me up at night, even a year later. "I'll be waiting for you when you get out. Meet me by the employee exit on your way out, or else..." He gave me that disgusting smile and walked away. I went behind the counter and started sobbing. I never imagined I'd have something like this happen to me, and now that it had, all of my knowledge of what to do went out the window. I was crying like a little girl. I decided to tell my manager at the end of the day because I didn't want to be afraid of coming to work. When I told him, he was mortified that I hadn't told him sooner. He walked me to a secret exit to the employee parking lot so I wouldn't see the man. The next morning we went to the security office and I gave a description to all of park security of what he looked like, and what he normally would wear. I went back to my shop with 2 co-workers, and not even 5 minutes later, here he came, strolling over with an angry look on his face. I hadn't met him, and he was furious. My co-workers noticed my panic as I ran and hid in the back. I hadn't told them about my situation yet, and when I did, they told me they wouldn't leave me alone even after their shift was over, seeing as I was the closer and they didn't want me to be left alone. I called security and told them what he was wearing, so they updated information. They posted a security officer outside of my shop. He seemed to disappear because of that. When the officer left to take care of something, he came back. Security realized that every time a clothed officer was around, he would hide. So they posted a plainclothes officer across from my shop, posing as a customer. I was being used as bait ultimately, but I felt it was important to get him out of the park. Security eventually apprehended him later that day as he was headed towards my shop. They asked me for identification on him, and I remember breaking down and sobbing. The officer comforted me. Finally, this nightmare was over. He never physically threatened me or wielded a weapon, but he was doing enough verbal threats to make me fear for my life. They banned him from all Six Flags parks across the country, revoked his membership status, and took him into custody. Unfortunately, as there was no violent act committed, they had to let him go. As I drove home that night, I saw him walking on the side of the road, and I immediately sped away in fear he would see me through the window and chase me. At least he couldn't get to me at work anymore. I found out a couple weeks later from one of my security friends that he saw my stalker being arrested in a town over. I went and looked up arrest records for that town later that day, and saw he'd been arrested for indecent exposure, public endangerment, and public intoxication. I know what happened to me is not as severe as other stories, but it was one of the most terrifying weeks of my life. You really don't think something like this will happen to you until it does. Please, everyone, always notice who's around you at all times, and be cautious of everybody. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 391. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I'm recording much earlier than I usually do. Currently, it's almost 2:30. So I have to be mindful of sounds outside. We're having a little bit of nice weather today. I'm hoping to get it done early enough that I might be able to get out and enjoy some of it. Should be able to do. Yeah, should be able to do. So I have to be mindful of the noises people are making. I can't get grumpy if we've got good weather and people try to enjoy it in Scotland. I mean, I probably will get grumpy if they get too noisy, but I really shouldn't. I shouldn't begrudge them. We don't get a lot of good weather here. But, where are we now? Oh, we're only in April and we're getting sun, so hopefully that means we're in for a nice summer when the summertime gets here. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.